Good morning. We have quite a few announcements this morning, and if I miss one, I'm sure somebody will let me know. You had better clear your social calendars for the coming weekend. On April 5th, which is Friday night this coming week, is open mic. On Saturday night, here in the meeting house, is that correct, Kathleen? It is. Cynthia McLeod and Gordon Belcher will be here for a concert. And on Sunday, April 7th, right after the service, there will be a special congregational meeting to introduce a new possibility for the congregation. That is not about a minister, just in case that's what you thought those words meant. They didn't. It's a new idea for a project here among you. So please clear your social calendars and come participate at all of those lovely events. And one other announcement, this is pledge season, and as you are preparing yourselves to hire a new minister, please consider your pledge and filling that out so the planning committee can make plans for the budget for the coming year. And you have been asked, if possible, to think about increasing your pledge by 10%, if that is at all possible. And as you know, and as Alan Brooks, the pledge chair, always says, whatever you are able to give is always gracious and generous and bountiful. So we welcome you to First Parish Northborough on this absolutely stunning Easter morning. We Unitarian Universalists are a non-creedal, religiously liberal faith tradition. We hold in our worship and in our faith formation that each individual and each community will explore a wide and varied set of beliefs and ideas that encourage us to live life as a spiritual journey, deepening our connections to compassion, justice, and an understanding of eternal truth. I'm Reverend Abigail Stockman. I'm the interim minister. If you have any questions about Unitarian Universalism or First Parish Church, please don't hesitate to be in touch with me or anyone that you meet here in the pews or on Zoom. And we are a community in multiple locations. So let's take a moment to greet one another by waving to those online and those around us until the chime is rung. And I'm going to take a moment to come down and see everyone on Zoom.
Wave at the monitor.
Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here.
Our call to worship this morning are the words of Peggy Clark. Easter is a holiday of miracles. It is life from death, joy from sorrow, celebration from mourning. Easter reminds us that all is never lost, that the story continues as long as we are here to tell it. So gather up your worries, and we are going to bury them beneath the ground and watch them transform into flowers of hope, pushing through the earth and reminding us on Easter morning that love brings us back to life, calls us from sadness, from grief, from anxiety, into a world renewed and alive and filled with joy once again. In just a moment, Lisa is going to light your chalice. As she does so, what I'd like to invite you to do, please, is I will say a phrase and I invite you to repeat it after me. And when I go like this, that's the time for you to repeat it. And she will light the chalice. This is the light of love. This is the light of love. May its warmth and its illumination be fuel for transformation. Blessings. Please rise in spirit, body as you are able, and let us sing together, Now the Green Blade Riseth, number 266 in the gray hymnal. The words will be printed on the screen for those who prefer to read it there. Where would you like to read from? Here or here? Here. Okay, great.
Okay, I don't have a very strong voice. Is this loud enough? No?
No moving the mic.
Maybe I should be at that.
Is this okay, Stephanie?
You're coming through clear up here.
Great.
Oh, okay. All right. All right, so this is a story called Continuing the Story by Rachel Lonberg. In the church that raised me, there was a woman named Gussie. Gussie was 81 years older than me. I considered her a special friend. Gussie was the kind of person who just about everybody considered a special friend. One of the wonderful things about Gussie was that she dressed for church. She emerged from the struggles of her life with a commitment to beauty and elegance. Her formal suit, her hat, and gloves stood out in the congregation. Most people in this suburban Seattle congregation dressed in polar fleece and sensible shoes, as if a hike might break out at any moment. On Easter, Gussie always outdid herself, wearing an Easter bonnet tastefully done up with flowers. Everyone looked forward to seeing the beauty and joy she embodied on Easter mornings. Gussie died when she was in her late 90s after a long, meaningful life and a brief illness. She died in the early spring, a few weeks before Easter. We all mourned. People shared how sad that they were not to be able to see Gussie in her beautiful Easter bonnet that year. It felt like the end of Gussie's story. Then someone had an idea. What if we wore Easter bonnets like Gussie did? The word spread. On Easter morning, the sanctuary was filled with Easter bonnets and other hats on the heads of dozens of people of all genders. It was beautiful. The church has continued that tradition. People wear Easter bonnets and other hats every Easter morning. People who loved Gussie, people who never knew Gussie, people who weren't even born before her death, all have been invited into Gussie's story. Her commitment to beauty and joy lives on. While this Easter bonnet tradition has faded some over the years, it has continued. This is my favorite resurrection story. People of all ages and all genders wearing Easter bonnets year after year in memory of someone that not all of them remember. It's a triumph of love over death, which is the core of the Easter message. Death is never the end of the story. Gussie's story continues on in the hearts and on the heads of the congregation that loved her.
In the soft earth beneath our dry feet, the earth, she moves and moans anew, and we are called to plant our seedlings with sacred deeds of deepening hues. Across the blue sky above our heads, the sun's warm rays come right to us. The wind lifts spirits from our kingdom, our love song reaches to newfound heights.
Primavera, la primavera, we give thanks for your living vow. In this season of new beginnings, la primavera calls to us now.
The lilied springtime keeps coming forth, rebirthing us from dark places with rain and misting. They grow taller, and we grow deeper in good graces. As we emerge as siblings of faith, the spring tells us to show we care for one another and our mother, and let it be our solemn prayer.
Primavera, la primavera, we give thanks for your living vow. In this season of new beginnings, la primavera calls to us now. Primavera, la primavera, we give thanks for your living vow. In this season of new beginnings, la primavera calls to us now.
Primavera indeed outside today. The sharing of personal joys and sorrows is a ritual of connection observed in many of our faith communities. Let us continue in a spirit of prayer, meditation, reflection, with these words of Julia Hamilton: "Spirit of hope, settle into our bones on this Easter morning. Remind us once again that the dawn light is never a gamble. If there was ever a sure bet, it is the sunrise. Even stones crumble, even grief changes and shifts, and death is a mystery that is certain but not solid. But hope is like the sunrise, eternal and bone-bred within us. We are creatures built by sunshine and cannot carve this hope out of our bones if we tried. And yet people have tried to entomb the light, tried to seal off the morning. Emperors and kings, priests and patriarchs have brought down death, certain but not solid, on any who point to a new dawn. In these fearful moments, we can be forgiven if we stumble and doubt and deny. But still the sun rises and calls her children into bloom. Always, she says, always I will return. So don't despair, all is not lost. The small ways of petty tyrants never win. So place your money on the sunrise. Who are we to bet against glory. Let us have a moment of silence. Amen. Please rise in spirit, body as you are able, and let us sing number 269. Lo, the day of days is here. The words will also be on the screen.
Hallelujah. Each Sunday we have this opportunity for financial generosity. Each week the collected offering is shared between this congregation's general operating fund and a designated nonprofit organization. For the month of March, we set the half plate aside to UU the Vote 2024. UU the Vote reminds us our faith calls us toward building democratic processes in our congregations and communities. This year, we will continue to advance our commitment to democracy through local action, election defense, and rigorous political education. May we continue to be as generous as we are able. The offering for the work of this congregation and the work of UU the Vote will now be gratefully received, and we hope gratefully given.
Can we say together when I give this, blessed be of thanks for the offering that was just taken. Blessed be. Thanks. For all its vitality, spring is seldom gregarious. Write Mark and Nancy Hines. It continues to be a season of solitude and individuality, and for all its forward-looking aspiration, keeps close ties to winter. Spring grows out of precariousness, a tiny shoot under a changing and agitated March sky, wild asparagus pushing from the slowly thawing earth under a short-lived sun, soft marsh grass, and fiddlehead ferns hiding in the spot belly of the dripping woods. Many things that pass in the glancing of an eye, fleeting and rare, fragile and tender, unprotected and exposed, endearing. Birth in spring among soggy pastures, cold flocks, and delicate buds is never easy. Shad and salmon, driven by blind instinct, must struggle against the stream to deliver new life in the warmer upper reaches of the rivers. Young lambs born in February die in April. Life is taken so that it may be given. A young rabbi walks to Jerusalem and disappears forever into springtime. Yet for all this, springtime is never weak, just young, delicate, and disarmed. More than a season, spring is a pattern that rises spontaneously out of nature and human life. It is an outline we follow, the proverbial string through the labyrinth, an archetype that leads to meaning. When old patterns atrophy and institutions and attitudes no longer work, spring appears with its images of birth and childhood and beginnings. It comes predictably each year as the earth tilts through the solar winds. It comes unpredictably at any time in life, even when energy and time seem spent. Thus ends the reading. The weather report apparently suggests that it may snow here next Wednesday. Spring is indeed keeping close ties with winter. Perhaps that is part of the pattern of spring. It is not just the beautiful flowers we love to admire. It is not a steady trajectory of growth and growing warmth alongside growing sunlight, each day a little more until it's enough to call it summer. It is more of a back and forth between the rising warmth and sunlight contrasted against the storms of snow or sleet or cold rain, maintaining the frozen parts of the earth beneath our feet. This is what makes spring precarious, unstable, and unsecured. the delicateness of those tiny green shoots, brave enough, full of chutzpah, as we would say in New York, and warmed just enough to break through a tiny spot of thawed ground. Is it not just foolishness to poke through that enemy spot of thawed earth when everything else around them is frozen? Did they not read the memo about global warming? Don't they know this could be a hoax before the next ice storm? Spam alert, you brave, but as your elders might say if they were still alive, you foolish shoots. Did you not read about the latest scam? It looks like spring, it smells like the beginning of spring, but beware, it might not yet be. Winter is still possible with its harsh winds and its dark gray clouds obscuring the sun's warming rays. But those green shoots, they are the nature of hope, as Emily Dickinson so exquisitely put it into words. It is a thing with feathers and is even sweetest in the gale and never stops at all. Alas, we are blessed by all that hope which remains undaunted even in knowledge of spring's precariousness. Blessed by the wild asparagus and other first responders to life's call to hope, to renewal, to resurrection. We are blessed by all the impulses to new life that have arisen throughout human history, and those that arise now, and those that will arise in the future we cannot yet see. When old patterns atrophy and institutions and attitudes no longer work, spring appears with its images of birth, childhood, and beginnings, wrote the authors of today's reading. Continuing to note that spring is, quote, a pattern that rises spontaneously out of nature and human life, end quote. We live in a time that perhaps the future will view as paradigm changing. A paradigm is the meaning, the container within which we operate. The most overused but useful example is the fact that it would be ridiculous to ask a fish what it's like to swim in water. They have no other experience. Water is fish's paradigm. The pandemic may have acted as a kind of final straw for some of the patterns and institutions and attitudes, the paradigms that have grounded our culture for the last few hundred years. Perhaps, just perhaps, they are no longer working as they did, as we expect them to, and sometimes place hope there. And as the joke goes, this is the good news and the bad news. Because there is hope that new life can arise when the old no longer works as we expect it to. This is the story of Easter in the Christian tradition. It is at heart the story of hope for a new paradigm. The story of Jesus, the rabbi who lived in a culture and paradigm where power obtained through force and fear and fed by greed was the accepted paradigm. It was expected that life simply rolled on that way. The human beings who lived in this water, in this paradigm, behaved as we all do. Most just accepted the reality as it was and did their best to keep swimming and hope not to be crushed by the weight of the water. Some, maybe even an equal number, decided they could profit from this paradigm and began to find ways to prove only their own lot at the expense of others around them. All were caught in the idea of being separate and alone in that water. But there were also in that water some crocuses and fiddlehead ferns and wild asparagus, pardon my mixing all these metaphors, among them that insisted, who became brave enough to poke some green shoots of new paradigms: freedom, compassion, kindness, equality, justice, peace, and love through the hard, frozen earth of oppression, greed, violence, selfishness, inequality, and injustice. In there was a vision that human beings were not alone, that we are all in this together, that we need one another, and that we could learn to swim together in love. It was a new paradigm. It takes a lot of work, as it turns out, to swim in the water of capital L love, which is not about our affection for one another, rather than the water of power over. There are no crickets here. That is my cell phone telling me there is a message. Just for all who hear the cricket going and are wondering. In the metaphor of winter to spring, we know that under the frozen crust of the earth in winter live the roots and the bugs and the bacteria that will allow new life to arise. But they're prevented from expressing their full potential, their color and vibrancy, from producing fruit while struggling just to survive under the earth's frozen, hard, oppressive crust. Right now, we live in a world where justice and peace are precarious. They are like spring. We celebrate Easter this year against a background of a world in disarray. We heard mentioned in Joys and Sorrows this morning, the Middle East, the Ukraine, the immigrant workers who have come to this country in order to find those blossoms of peace and freedom and justice, some of whom gave their life this week in doing hard work that needs to be done. We also live in a culture desperately holding on to structures that for a long time have upheld and supported our ideals and our values, and maybe they are not working as well for us. A question Colbert King, a Washington Post columnist, offered this week in one of his columns speaking about Holy Week and particularly about Jerusalem, asked these questions. Is there any space left for justice, morality, and peace? Any desire to lift up the oppressed regardless of which side of a border they live on? To reconcile and commit to a common good. I think these are questions we can all ask, no matter where we live. He goes on to say, for him, this Holy Week is for believers to see and know. As some of us prayed on Good Friday, he writes, that things which were cast down are being raised up, and things which have grown old are being made new. A week built on hope, he ends. What would it take to bring out from the hard, frozen crusts of earth where oppression dominates, whether it's in our own hearts for ourselves, whether it's in our community towards people who are seen as different or outside, whether it's in the larger world and even in the environment. What happens when all of that is brought into the light and warmth of a nurturing environment? An environment that encourages thriving and blossoming. Isn't that what the gift of life is for? To thrive and to blossom? Isn't that the spring that a young rabbi walked into Jerusalem to bring? One of my favorite poetic renderings of the Easter story comes from the poet farmer Wendell Berry in his manifesto, The Mad Liberation Front. It begins with a description of the paradigm of power and greed that can so easily become the water in which any and all of us can swim. His first stanza goes, love the quick profit, the annual raise, vacation with pay, want more of everything ready-made, be afraid to know your neighbors and to die. And you will have a window in your head, not even your future will be a mystery anymore. Your mind will be punched in a card and shut away in a little drawer. When they want you to buy something, they will call you. When they want you to die for profit, they will let you know. That's the end of his first stanza. Now, to be clear, there is nothing wrong in my mind with paid vacations nor annual raises, and I am often grateful for the ready-made. But Berry is shouting at us not to get attached to those at the expense of our own inherent dignity and worthiness or anyone else's, because then we are all for sale. We no longer own ourselves. And while it is simple to write this in words, my life experience tells me it is not easy to live. I like my paid vacations. Jesus, the rabbi, was offering similarly powerful words and metaphors to the people who were coming to listen to him. The they of Berry's poems who want you to buy something or die for a profit, they are the ones with the most power in any system. They are the ones with the most game chips to lose if we build a world based not on power, fear, and greed, nor maintained by many forms of violence. Those with power in Jesus' time were no different and no less unchallenged by the mainstream culture around them. So those powerful people were frightened by the numbers of previously docile people who were listening to Jesus and beginning to imagine and call for armed rebellion, though armed rebellion was not Jesus's message. Jesus's message was that capital L love, practiced daily and by communities of people, was stronger than violence, fear, and greed. But many of Jesus's followers lost hope when they saw that Jesus's commitment to practicing this love was not going to save him from a cruel and tortured death. And in that moment, when they gave up hope, they became the crowd that called for Jesus's death when given the choice. Fear for their own lives overcame the love they had been so drawn to hearing about in Jesus's preaching and in his human incarnate living. The power of the resurrection story, even for those of us for whom it is purely metaphorical, is that we can become a crocus, a wild asparagus, or a fiddlehead fern if we can push through the frozen earth of fear and greed and desire for power that resides both within us and around us, and is always a temptation for every one of us. If we can rise to new life in the form of capital L love, peace building, compassion, kindness, freedom, equality, all of that can then arise. Perhaps sometimes we are one of the they, as some of Jesus's followers, like the tax collectors, were. Perhaps not. Or as the newly evolving paradigm of identity intersectionality suggests, I won't try and say that fast, parts of us and parts of our lives may be identified with they, and other aspects of our lives may not. We are none of us one-dimensional. Barry, in his poem, goes on to offer us antidotes to loving the quick prophet. Here are some snatches of lines chosen at random from his longish poem. So friends, every day do something that won't compute. Love the world. Love someone who does not deserve it. Work for nothing. Love take all that you have and be poor. Ask the questions that have no answers. Plant sequoias. Say that your main crop is the forest that you did not plant and that you will not live to harvest. Put your faith in the 2 inches of humus that will build under the trees every 1,000 years. Expect the end of the world. Laugh. Laughter is immeasurable. Be joyful though you have considered all the facts. Go with your love to the fields. Swear allegiance to what is nighest your thoughts. And be like the fox who makes more tracks than necessary, some in the wrong direction. And his final antidote, practice resurrection. Reverend Rachel Lonberg, who wrote the story about Gussie, offers as a preface to her story 2 of Barry's lines. Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts. Practice resurrection. The story of the Bonnets is not at heart about remembering Gussie. It is at heart about keeping alive Gussie's enthusiasm, an embodiment of joy and beauty in the world. Someday, wearing Easter bonnets in that congregation may no longer bring them that joy. It may just become a rigid expectation, though I hope not. But in that moment, some new green shoot of joy and beauty may arise. Let us learn to practice resurrection. Let us embody joy and beauty. The ways and institutions that helped us to do it before may need to find new paradigms, new waters in which they swim. but the underlying values of love that nurtures freedom, peace building, kindness, equality, joy, and beauty, those values continue. May we each find enough bravery every day to push our own wild asparagus noses through a tiny patch of thawing earth somewhere in our lives to bring our core values to life again. Amen. There is now a very special moment. It is the time for a congregational announcement, after which, oh, I did this backwards. Is that okay? Yeah? Come on, I blew it, guys. I turned it around. And afterwards, we will sing number 368.
I am very excited. But first, I want to thank bunches of people. Audrey and Cindy, who have put in mega hours of their precious time. Karen Nelson, Cynthia Bushy, who joined with interviewing and vetting ministers. Reverend Abigail, helping us decipher the UU process, this new hiring process. Thank you. Janet Ruggieri, our member and lawyer, who helped look at the contract, and it was a long contract. Susan Tedesco, our church administrator, for responding quickly to everything we needed. And the governing board and the congregation for trusting and having patience with this new hiring process. There you go.
All right, here we are. The duo, Audrey and Cindy. This is a search update for you. As you may remember, we have been tasked with hiring, well, actually recommending to the board the hiring of a new minister. And in this week's perspective, there at the bottom, there was a reminder of that process and how it goes. Okay. So we have interviewed 4 candidates. We had 5 apply. The last candidate that we interviewed was the one. Our task is complete. We have hired, the contract has been signed, and our new minister will be starting August 1st. Would you like to know their name? Yes. It is Reverend Steve Wilson. He is living in Lexington, Massachusetts. He has for many years. Most recently, he was minister at the Pacific Unitarian Church in Rancho Palos Verdes, California. He is back now in this area, and he will be, he's living in his condo in Lexington. His family is there. His aging father that has Alzheimer's is there, along with his 2 brothers. So he is home here to help his father transition. But in the meantime, we get to have him here as averaging 25 hours a week with us. So Audrey, you have some things you want to say?
Celia's thank you sound like the Academy Awards with all the... Well, I just want to share with you is just some of the comments from people that he gave us as references, key words that stood out. One was that when he came to their congregation, he brought vitality, The other was that he brought a sense of abundance and optimism, and that he really had a wonderful across generations relationship with young and old, and that he was very authentic. What you see is what you get. And those were really strong comments and our experience of him as well. So there will be, when you leave today, a handout with his sense of what ministry means to him and the value of it. And as we are sharing with you, we've coordinated this very well, that Lori Pandit is also sending out an email to the congregation, so they're hearing, those who are not here, what you're hearing now. And also there will be a copy on that people can print out of what you'll be getting as a handout. So we will also have the opportunity for you to meet him on April 26th. Yes, April 26th. We'll start in the meeting house so people on Zoom will be able to see him and get to know him. And then we'll have a dinner over in the parish hall. So, and that will be in the handout, so you'll be able to remember. And we have one last comment that we'd like to say. Yes!
So I don't think you need to rise in spirit, but if it can rise a little more, keep it going up. And body as you are able, and let us sing number 368. Now let us sing. In this precarious season, may we nurture the green shoots of kindness, peace, and generosity. And Rachel Longbird says, may we know in our bones that death is not the end of the story. May we practice resurrection. Amen, and congratulations.